In 2010, for the 2011 model year, Nissan decided to introduce something a bit odd to the market. The Nissan Juke, which ran from the 2011 model year through 2017, at least in the States. This featured a 1.6 liter turbocharged four-cylinder engine here in the States, making about 188 horsepower. For 2013, however, Nissan decided to step it up a little bit and gave us this. What you see next to me is a 2014 Nissan Juke Nismo. As anybody who knows Nissan knows, Nismo is always the higher performance version of certain models. There's a Nismo Juke, Nismo GTR, Nismo 370Z, and this is the quirky little Juke version of that, featuring a slightly higher powered version of the same 1.6 liter turbo engine and a lot of updated styling over your standard Juke. Before we get into the mechanicals, we'll go around, we'll look at the exterior, interior styling, point out the differences, the sportier touches. We'll talk about the mechanicals, then we'll take this thing on a drive. Pardon the wind noise. It's a very windy day here in East Tennessee, but this year, if you can find a nice day in East Tennessee to shoot a video, you take it. Another small side note, if you're in China, or you go to China, either way, you'll see these things running around, but they're rebadged as an Infiniti ESQ, but it's the same car. I want to start out by talking about the name, Juke. Now, of course, here in America, you hear Juke, what's the first thing you think? A jukebox, a club, dancing, right? Well, I actually did a little research, wrote down the meanings that what this is supposed to mean in this name. And what you have is to dance, to change direction, to demonstrating agility, or to outmaneuver someone in a deceptive manner. Juke is a term for movement, for excitement. Think jukebox. If the jukebox is going, you're probably dancing. Most people anyway. So definitely, hopefully a very fitting name for this car. Definitely goes with the odd styling, which we'll get into right now. All right, so we'll get started on the exterior styling. And before I get into it, I just want to say, excuse, the car is a bit dirty. I borrowed this from a coworker. You already know I don't have time to do a lot of things with my job. Obviously, neither does he. Anyway, let's get into it. Now, if we look at the overall shape of the car, this is what's referred to in the car industry as Coke bottle styling. Think back to the old classic glass Coca-Cola bottles. Here, what this means, you've got a narrow center surrounded by big flared fenders. As you can see, if you go down the side profile, you got big flared front haunches here, and same in the rear. Coke bottle styling, very interesting. Now, if we look at the overall shape of the car, Nissan went for a coupe-like design, and they achieved this in a few ways. Now, if you think of a racing helmet or a crash helmet, and then look at this glass house here, you see it almost resembles the shape of the visor on those helmets. Another thing that contributes to this styling is right here. These are the rear door handles, which are integrated into the pillars. This is not the first time Nissan's done this. They actually started doing this back in the 80s when they made the Nissan Pathfinder. 80s, early 90s. They made the Nissan Pathfinder. They carried that over into the Nissan Xterra and a few other models, and they used that in this to try to give this four-door car a more coupe-like design. Now, if we walk around, you see the odd styling of this thing. First off, and ignore the slightly cracked hood, I left that there for convenience sake. First, we have running lights and turn signals mounted on top of the fenders on either side of the hood. And these are actually visible from inside the cabin. I'll show you that a little bit later. We come down below that, you have these headlights in pods, kind of almost like bug eyes, you might say. Have one on either side, obviously. Come down below that, you have LED running lamps. Now here in the center of the grille, you have the same Nissan design that they've been doing for many years, this kind of almost U-shaped chrome like they like to do. Now a few of the touches that will distinguish this Nismo from a normal model, we'll start down here in the lower grille area. You can see it's kind of shaped differently from a standard Juke. It doesn't have that series of circles. It's got a nice red accent stripe running across. And that red accent stripe continues down the side skirts here, all the way down both sides of the car and around to the back on this rear diffuser. I kind of like the placement of this center reflector here, kind of looking like a F1 rain light. That's kind of cool. Obvious touches are the Nismo badge. That's very obvious. You get a rear spoiler on these things, and you get these right here. 10-spoke black wheels, only on the Nismo models of the Nissan Juke. So it's not like these things are hard to distinguish from a normal one. Here you've got the red mirror caps to match the red accented trim. Contributes to I think a much better looking version of the Nissan Juke. Around back again, we see these very uniquely styled taillights that kind of run up along the hatch here. On later models, these are slightly updated from this, but the shape of the car is still the same. You get a little rear window, although I've seen smaller. And that's really the majority of your exterior styling on the car. About these lights, as I was doing my research, I run across a quote out of the New York Times review on this thing. The writer described these as bioluminescent slugs, is the effect they give when you're driving at night. I actually have driven this thing at night once, just took it out to sea, and yeah, there's like little orange slugs in your line of sight. In fact, I actually took a short video demonstrating that. I'll show you that right now. When you're driving around at night, the turn signal humps are like little orange glowing humps or bugs on the hood in front of you all the time. It's kind of wild to look at. Alright, let's go inside the Juke and check out the interior. Now you open the door, not much to see on the door panels. You got a nice little chrome door pull here. Power window controls again, 4 of them because it is a 4-door car. Right here you have some nice, pretty grippy sport seats. Now there was a RS model of this launched in 2014 in the States that had Recaro buckets. These aren't exactly that, but they're still nice, bolstery, grippy, and my big butt barely fits in them. Now the owner has put in some WeatherTech floor mats, which is awesome. They make them for this car, and I should probably do to all of our cars too. Climbing inside, here are climate vents, are pretty much typical Nissan stuff. You flip them, rotate them. Let me go and start this thing, it's hot. Your start stop button down here on the Nismo models, always trimmed in red. Fires right up. Alright, your gauge cluster in your Nismos, you get a red tachometer on the left with Nismo printed up at the top. On the right side you get a speedometer that registers 140 miles per hour. Here in the center is your driver information screen. And you got 2 buttons down below right here. This one's for your display brightness. You can see if you push the button, you get a series of little circular indicators that go away as you adjust the brightness down and then back up. And then this button right here cycles between your trip odometers and different types of information. Now excuse the light drowning in through here. That's actually because of another feature that I'll show you in a second that you can probably already see. But this button will cycle through different information, and now you're back on trip A and overall mileage. Now the reason you're getting light on the gauge cluster, even though I'm under the gauge cluster visor, is this right here, the styling of it. It's kind of got this little break in it. It's almost like it's floating, which is kind of a cool touch, unless you're trying to put a camera in to see the gauges. Move over here, you've got this big prominent center button for your hazard lights. Come on down, you have, I'm assuming that these were optioned with a touchscreen infotainment, but I'm not entirely for certain. But this is your typical Nissan head unit. Our 2012 Quest had the exact same unit. It's a good unit, but it's definitely not a touchscreen interface. Down here, below your stereo, is your climate controls, which have an extra feature which we'll get to in a minute. Come down below that, here's your automatic gear shifter and a center console that is supposed to resemble the gas tank of a motorcycle, like a sport bike or something. On this console you get a Nismo badge, also pretty neat. That's in addition to another interior touch that lets you know this thing is sporty. You've got the red center line on the steering wheel. Down here you get a couple of cup holders, you get a little bit of center storage, a lower little tiny one, and then of course an upper bigger one. Other interior accents that tell you this thing is something special: you get red contrasted stitching on the seats, you get red in the perforations, which is again a really nice touch. Also up front, if we look in front of the console, we get a nice little rubber grippy area where I guess you would put things you don't want to slide around. Not really big enough for a smartphone, especially these days. You do get a 12-volt power outlet over here. If we make our way to the steering wheel, you get a lot of standard Nissan controls. Here's your cruise control settings, and here's your phone and radio controls. Down here to the left of the steering wheel, you have your mirror controls, your traction control off, and your switch to engage and disengage your all-wheel drive system, which the Nismo has. If we come over to the passenger side and look at the glove box, we pull that down, typical glove box, except this thing's actually kind of deep. It swallows most of my arm. So even though it's a small car, you got a good amount of storage up front between the center consoles, two areas, and this big glove box. Not to mention you do have door pockets in the door panels. Alright, like I've already stated before and have shown, this is a four-door vehicle, albeit kind of small. So now I'm going to climb in the back and, well, I'm going to try to. I'm quite tall and large at the same time. This should be interesting. So excuse any bad audio that may come out of this. But you kind of back in, duck your head, and then swing yourself across, which is interesting. And you can get in. Now, once you're in, it is not comfortable in the least. You can close the door, although, man, it really squeezes you then. But here, my knees are on either side of the seat, and this seat is in a position for me to drive. And pretty much standard driving position for someone 6 foot or more. And I mean, it's right on me. My head is digging into the ceiling. This is not a long-term situation. If you have to go across town in the back of this thing, if you have to go out with coworkers to get lunch, okay, maybe, but there's no way an adult is riding back here without getting out and hurting everywhere, especially in the neck. Children, yeah, you can put kids back here, although as they start to get taller, they're going to start to get uncomfortable too, because it is just tight back here. Now, other than trying to fit in the rear, let's talk about the rear seat itself. No sport buckets back here. You get a 60-40 split rear bench with tabs you pull up. You can fold it down and increase your cargo area. You do have removable headrests, which the owner had removed and I put back for the video. But in order to remove them, they are so close to the ceiling here that you can only remove the headrests with the seat tilted forward. There's no room for them to pull up and out. You do get the red contrasted stitching that continues to the back to add a little bit of that Nismo styling. You get a pocket on the rear of the passenger seat, but not the driver. Nothing at all in the center, not even cup holders, no climate vents, nothing like that. You do get a cup holder in the door panels on either side, so you can at least get 2 drinks back here with your 2, actually 3, 3, that's almost funny to say, very uncomfortable passengers. I would not put 3 people back here, personally, just saying. And we'll move finally to the rear hatch area. Open it up, kind of a small door, but it's a small car. The owner put in this cool Motor Trend mat in the back, which really looks good. But back here, nothing much to see. Look around. You got some anchors for child seats. But really that's about it. You got a cargo light over here so you can see in the dark. Lift these up and you've got a spare tire and some little holes to put things if you want to put small things. Now I read that the all-wheel drive models did not come with it. The front-wheel drives did, and that is extra in-floor storage. But when you add the complexity of an all-wheel drive system, well, you can't have extra in-floor storage. Once again, this is not all the cargo area you can get. You can fold down these second row seats and get a little bit more. And the owner of this thing actually has used this thing to carry large tubs of things when you know, he needed to make some like hot shot runs and stuff. So it's proved to be a little bit versatile for something as small as it is. Anyway, no power controls up here. You just pull and close the tailgate. And that's all there is in the back. Alright, now let's discuss the coolest feature in the front of the Nissan Juke. Now this feature is available on all models except the base S model. But of course it's the coolest in the Nismos. And so what you have here, if I push this button, is your climate controls. You see your buttons have the orange text on them. It's got all the different functions for your climate. AC off, defrosters, your positioning, and if you push a different positioning button, there's a light that lights up telling you where it's going, where the air is going. To the left, you've got your temperature control. You can see it change right there. To the right, you've got your fan speed. You can see that change on the screen. And it even offers kind of this cool little graphic in the middle to show just how intensely the air is blowing out on you. That's all standard. But up here you have this button marked D mode, which stands for drive mode. If we push it, all of this stuff suddenly changes. Your buttons now have this white text to be used with your drive mode settings. Now your temperature control knob over here is still a temperature control knob even in this mode. As you can see, it updates the temperature in the bottom as you change it. So down here at the bottom, it'll still tell you the AC climate control mode you're in, your temperature, and your fan speed. However, you cannot control fan speed while in drive modes because this is now a selection knob. Over here you have setup. You push that button and you can go through and do things like display brightness, button brightness, which is kind of cool to be able to set that aside from display brightness. Your language, your units, I'm assuming whether you want to go English or metric, yeah. Clock, things like that. Drive info. So it gives you a timer here. I'm assuming 55 being an average speed, and miles driven, I'm guessing since the last reset. If we push eco info, this gives you a nice little graph readout of how economically you've been driving lately. I don't think anybody with a Nismo is going to look at that. Over on this side is your drive mode selections. Push normal, and it gives you a little readout of, okay, if this is a normal, this is a sport, what have you. And here you have a torque readout. And also a battery level indicator, which is really nice. So now if I put this thing down and drive and just drive forward a little bit, you can see the torque move. So it gives you a little bit of a torque indication. Drop it into sport. Let me back up where I was. Drop it into sport, you get a boost gauge, which is not going to give me anything here in a parking lot. I'll have to get it out on the road to actually see any readout on that. But since you're in sport mode, it's going to tell you how much boost you're getting out of your turbo. Also really cool. Put it in eco mode. Of course, it's going to be the most economical driving mode. It's going to shift sooner. It's not going to allow you as good acceleration. And it's going to give you a readout of just how economically you're driving. Give you a little score up to 5 stars over here, so you can grade yourself on how economically you're driving, except for one thing. this is a Nismo. Nobody cares about that. So we'll put this back in normal for now. Back over to climate, and suddenly I can adjust the fan speed again. All right, let's move on. All right, now let's talk powertrain in the Nissan Juke. Now on the S, SV, and SL models, all came with a turbocharged 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine producing 188 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. However, this is the Nismo, which means they bumped up that turbo engine to 197 horsepower, 184 pound-feet of torque. With this setup, with this engine and transmission combination, it's estimated this car can do 0 to 62 miles per hour in 8.2 seconds. Okay, not exactly the fastest thing in the world, but I'm sure with its size, it feels kind of fun. Now, this thing weighs in the neighborhood of 3,200 pounds, which is probably why it only does 8.2. Estimated top speed about 120 miles per hour in the with the all-wheel drive system. Now, if you had opted to just buy the base model, the S model, you could only get a CVT transmission, and anybody who's watched my videos before knows how I feel about Nissan CVTs. Anyway, if you stepped up to the SV and the SL, you added both the Icon system inside and an optional 6-speed manual transmission. However, this car could not have come with it at all, because no matter what trim you got, if you got all-wheel drive, it's supposed to be a decent system. It's got the torque vectoring, which sends the power to the wheels as needed, but there's no manual option with the all-wheel drive, which, I'm sorry, I think is a mistake. I think a car like this could really benefit from a manual. They should have figured out how to do that, but they didn't. But anyway, this is what you get. The direct injected gasoline turbo 1.6 4-cylinder engine with 197 horsepower. Now, if you wanted to get even crazier, in 2014, Nissan introduced a Nismo RS model to the US market, which featured a few upgrades such as Recaro sport seats, carbon fiber bits, and the engine tuned to 215 horsepower, 210 pound-feet of torque, which I'm sure was definitely a much more enjoyable car to drive. And in 2013, if you were really insane and rich, you could have bought one of 23 Nissan Juke R models. These were built with the powertrain and engine and driveline from the Nissan GTR sports car. These things produced 545 horsepower. Like I said, there were only 23 made. They were originally only supposed to be test vehicles to see if it could be done, and then some rich people decided, well, I want one, and so they decided to make a very limited run of them. But if you had wanted one of these things at the time, you were paying well over $100,000 US, and I'm not even sure that you could have gotten them in the US. The research that I did didn't suggest that they came over here, but how cool would that be to have the entire Nissan GTR, pretty much Nissan supercar, engine and drivetrain in this quirky little ride. Anyway, that's all there is about power and driveline. Let's get this thing out on the road and actually experience it. Alright, we're in now, we're in the driver's seat, and the first thing you can see, I hope you can see, is right out of the hood you can see the bioluminescent slugs, the running light / turn signals up there. And it's daylight so you can't see them, but that's fine. But you can see the clear housings up there, which is just one of the wildest looks ever. Throw this thing down in drive. Let's check our drive mode. It says I'm in normal. That should be fine for now. Let's turn the AC up. It's a little warm in here. It is just the beginning of September. And let's take this thing out and see what it's like. And I'm so glad that I found my headband so I can do the point of view shots. I don't think there's any other way to film driving a Juke, and especially a Nismo. I know it's decently quick in normal mode. See, right now in drive mode, we're in normal. I'm not really giving it very much, and it's already a pretty quick car. which I think is another reason why the owner of this car really enjoys it, because it is quick and it's small and it's nimble. I assume we're about to find out just how nimble this thing is. I'm going to take this thing on a bit of a windy twisty. But yeah, in normal mode, man, that thing actually kind of gets up and goes, even in normal. And I'm getting my torque readout down here. It doesn't give any actual numbers. It just gives like a line graph of sorts. It doesn't really tell me any numbers, like this is a numerical value of what your torque is. But it's still kind of cool to see that go up and down as you get on the gas. I'm going to put it in sport mode. Oh, I could actually feel a difference in the drive line. Oh man, okay, now it's pretty quick. It's, you know, it's not supercar fast. It's not pinning you to the seat, but you can feel it. And it's really cool. Watch that boost gauge shoot up. That's really cool. So the boost is coming out of the turbocharger. It seems like a halfway decent ride. I mean, it is a slightly sportier suspension over your standard Juke. So you're going to expect a little bit rougher of a ride, but it's still decent. It's not quite on the level of our Town and Country by any means, because it is sportier. But Lord almighty, this thing actually does pull. Alright, I'm actually going to see. I'm just going to bring this thing to a stop. Hopefully nobody comes up behind me. Turn on the all-wheel drive. Yeah, it's a bit peppier there too. We're going to turn that off though. Disengage that because there's supposedly, according to the owner, a problem with the all-wheel drive differential in the rear, possibly from the last service. Alright, I'm doing about 40 miles an hour in sport. Let's punch it. Man, it'll get up there too, and it's got a 6,500 RPM red line, which is also pretty sweet. Now down here on the gear selector, you can actually bump this thing over to the left into manual mode, which is, it's a CVT that's supposedly, so kind of confusing they would have one, but let's try it. So we take off, we're in first, bump it to second, pretty responsive too, bump to third, fourth. I gotta say, it's pretty darn responsive for being a CVT. I didn't think CVTs were supposed to shift like standard automatics, but it does. So somebody who knows a little bit more about CVTs, and specifically Nissan CVTs, help me out here. I'm a bit confused. I'm kind of wondering how in the world I'm shifting a CVT transmission. But still, it's kind of cool, and it's kind of fun to bump those shifts like that, because they're actually quite responsive, considering that this isn't a dual clutch transmission. Anyway, let's go find some twists. Okay, so I went online and actually figured out how the CVT could shift in this car. So here's a simplified version. The CVT works by hydraulically adjusting the width between the input pulley and the output pulley in the transmission. By doing this, it changes gear ratios, changes the speed of the car, improves fuel efficiency, and all that. In this particular version of the CVT, you pretty much have the computer manipulating this process, changing the distances between these pulleys on the fly, and giving the illusion of gear changes. Although it seems to work very well, and it does feel like you're actually shifting a standard automatic. Man, this thing just likes to pull, and I'm barely on the throttle. I don't even think I'm half throttle on this thing. This thing just loves to pull in sport mode. And it's starting to rain, so let's go ahead and get this twisty stuff out of the way right now before the roads get too wet, because it literally just started. Oh Lord, you know what? It's not terrible. Probably the best handling thing I've ever driven. It actually does fairly well. We got a school bus up ahead. That's going to be a tight squeeze. This is not a wide road at all. There we go. turn the wipers on a little bit. Lights, wipers, here we go. Alright. I can't go very quick because, well, one, it's not my car, and two, there's cars up ahead. But this thing actually feels pretty good in the turns. It's not a sports car. It's still higher up in the air than a sports car is. But you can definitely feel the sportiness in this car. Alright, I'm going to take this thing back now and wrap it up. And so there you have it. That is the 2014 Nissan Juke Nismo. Now, this car seems like an okay car, and it seems to have served the owner pretty well. Since in the year and a half that I've known him, though, he's already had to put a transmission in this thing. Now, once again, it is a CVT, and anybody who knows me knows how I feel about Nissan CVTs, and a good portion of the car community feels the exact same way. Now, we also have to keep in mind that owner of this car is a hard driver. He likes to drive fast. It doesn't matter what he's in. He likes driving fast, and he's going to use this thing's potential. He's going to use this car to its fullest potential. It's a Nismo. He's going to treat it like one, which I would expect nothing less. But if you're in the market for one of these, just keep that in mind, that if you're going to get an all-wheel drive, you're going to get a CVT. You're not going to get a manual. Although, I wish it had come with one that would have been so much more fun than it already was to drive this thing. Hopefully, maybe somebody out there has already figured out a way in the time these have been out to stick a manual in one of these. Who knows? Or to make a manual Nismo all-wheel drive. That would be cool to see if somebody's done that. But CVT is what you get on these. But I've enjoyed driving it, and if what you're looking for is a weird car, looks odd, not too big, but kind of fast, fun to drive, this is definitely a good choice to make. As with anything, make sure, get it inspected, try to find out as much history as you can, and really do your research, and try to get as low miles as you can. Obviously, the lower the miles, the better chance you have of longevity. But from a fun standpoint, this thing has been a blast to drive around in, and it's not even the fastest thing in the world. So, with that, huge thanks to Josh at work for letting me borrow this car for this review. Really cool dude. I'm really glad I got a chance to drive this thing. It's been very enjoyable. Thanks to all of you for watching. Hopefully you watched it all the way through and you enjoyed it. It may not have been the best review in the world. I am still an amateur with amateur equipment and amateur experience and yada yada yada. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to get down there, give this thing a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell so you'll know when another video goes up. Also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at that car vlog channel. Occasionally I'll post something up on there, but I always put up on there when a new video goes live. So if you're following me there, no matter what happens with YouTube, you'll know when I put a video up. Also, I'm always looking for cars to review and drive on the channel. This Nismo makes 2 now that I borrowed from people that don't live with me. So if you have anything that you'd be willing to let me review and drive for this channel, hit me up on social media. If you're in the greater Knoxville area, let me know what you got. You'd be willing to let me do this, just like this right here, review it, take it on a test drive. I'll try to make something happen. I'll link a list down below in the description to a list that I put together and I add to as I think of them, of cars that I would like to review and drive on the channel. Some of them may be, things that more popular YouTubers might get to drive, but I put them on there anyway. Anyways, thank y'all for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have a great day. Stay healthy, stay safe. God bless. Y'all take care now.